Millionaire and in love, Michael Thompson proposed to Emily, but a small detail tormented him. Was it true love or just interest? To find out, he creates a risky test. What happens next changes everything, and the answer he finds is surprising. Michael Thompson looked out over the New York City skyline through the window of his office on the top floor of the tallest building on Wall Street. His brown eyes contemplated the horizon full of skyscrapers while his mind wandered over the recent events in his life. At 35, he had achieved everything anyone could dream of, a fortune estimated in billions, companies spread across 3 continents, and what he considered his greatest achievement, the love of Emily Parker. He adjusted his custom-made Italian tie and picked up the small black velvet ring box on his mahogany desk. Inside, a Cartier engagement ring sparkled with a 5-carat diamond. The proposal had been made just 2 weeks ago during a romantic dinner in Paris, and Emily had accepted with tears of joy. However, something bothered him, a feeling that had been growing day by day, fueled by past experiences and subtle observations. Michael couldn't shake the doubt that tormented him. Did Emily truly love him, or was she just interested in his fortune? "Mr. Thompson?" His secretary's voice over the intercom interrupted his thoughts. "Ms. Parker has just arrived for lunch." Michael put the ring in the drawer and took a deep breath. "You can send her in, Sarah." Emily appeared at the door like a vision. Her perfectly styled blonde hair framed delicate features, and her designer red dress elegantly hugged her curves. Her Christian Louboutin heels echoed on the marble floor as she approached with a radiant smile. "Darling, I've missed you." She hugged him, leaving a trail of expensive French perfume in the air. "How was the meeting with the Chinese investors?" Michael returned the hug, but his mind remained restless. He observed how she automatically checked the Patek Philippe watch on her wrist, a gift he had given in the first month of dating. It was a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but now seemed loaded with meaning. "It was productive," he replied, trying to maintain a casual tone. "Actually, Emily, I need to talk to you about something important." Her smile faltered for a moment. "Of course, my love. Did something happen?" Michael led her to the Italian leather sofa in the corner of the office. They sat side by side, and he noticed how she unconsciously adjusted her diamond bracelet, another gift from him. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about our future together," he began, carefully choosing his words, "and I've made an important decision." "You're scaring me, Michael," Emily said, her tone of voice revealing genuine concern. "Or was it just excellent acting?" "I've decided to make some changes in my life," he continued. "Significant changes that will affect our relationship." Emily's face paled slightly. "What kind of changes?" Michael stood up and walked to the window again. The plan he had devised during sleepless nights was beginning to take shape. It would be radical, perhaps even cruel, but necessary. He needed to be sure that Emily's love was genuine before taking the next step. "I'm tired of this life of luxury and appearances," he declared, turning to face her. "I want to simplify everything. Sell the companies, donate a considerable part to charity, live more modestly." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily stared at him with an expression that mixed disbelief and poorly disguised horror. But why?" she stammered. "You worked so hard to build all this. You can't just throw it all away." "I can and I will," Michael responded firmly. "In fact, I've already started the process. I sold my majority stake in the Asian companies." It was a lie, of course, part of his meticulously elaborated plan. He carefully observed every micro-expression on Emily's face, every change in her body language. "Michael, you need to think this through," she argued, standing up and holding his hands. "Maybe you're stressed, needing a vacation. We could travel. How to that private island in the Maldives that you like so much?" He held back the urge to smile, her first attempt suggesting something that involved spending money. "I've thought about this a lot, Emily. It's a decision that's been made." He paused strategically. "In fact, I've already put the mansion up for sale. I rented a small apartment in Queens." Emily let go of his hands as if they had burned her. "In Queens? But it's so far. And our wedding. We've already sent out invitations for the Plaza Hotel. We can do something simpler, Michael suggested, observing how she internally squirmed with each word. A small, intimate wedding. What matters is our love, isn't it? Emily sat down again, looking stunned. Michael could practically see the gears turning in her mind, trying to process the radical change in her life plans. I need some time to absorb all this, she finally said, her voice trembling slightly. It's a lot of information at once. Of course, my love, Michael responded softly. Take all the time you need, but know that I'll start. The move next week. Emily stood up mechanically, grabbing her Hermes bag. I need to go, I just remembered I have an appointment. But what about our lunch? Another time, she replied, already walking towards the door. I need to think. Michael watched her leave, noticing how her steps, once so confident, now seemed unsteady. As soon as the door closed, he allowed himself a small smile. The first phase of the plan was underway. Now it was a matter of time until he discovered if Emily's love would survive the apparent loss of his fortune. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. Ryan, I need that favor we talked about. Yes, the apartment in Queens, and prepare all the fake documents we agreed on. The test has begun. The apartment in Queens was exactly as Ryan had described. A modest but cozy environment on the 10th floor of a building without great luxuries. Michael observed the 750 square feet space, smaller than his former closet, and felt a strange mixture of apprehension and expectation. The freshly painted walls, in a neutral beige tone, contrasted with the few simple pieces of furniture he had ordered. Everything is as requested, Michael, Ryan commented, handing him a set of keys and a folder with documents. The fake papers for the sale of the companies are convincing, and I've already spread the news about your supposed financial difficulties among some strategic contacts. Michael nodded, leafing through the meticulously prepared documents. And the car? A 2015 Toyota Corolla, as you asked. It's in the garage. I managed to make it look like you sold your entire collection of imported cars to cover urgent debts. A discreet smile appeared on Michael's lips. His childhood friend and trusted lawyer had taken care of every detail with his usual precision. Ryan was the only person who knew the truth about the entire plan, and Michael trusted him blindly. Emily has been calling non-stop, Michael commented, sitting on the simple two-seater sofa. But I've been avoiding answering her since our conversation. In the office. Ryan occupied the armchair next to him, his expression revealing concern. Are you sure you want to go through with this? You might end up losing her for real. If I lose her, it's because I never really had her, Michael responded with a conviction he didn't entirely feel. I need to know, Ryan. I can't get married. With this doubt. Michael's cell phone vibrated for the 10th time that morning. It was Emily again. This time he decided to answer, putting it on speakerphone so Ryan could hear too. Michael, for God's sake, why are you avoiding me? Emily's voice sounded distressed. Sorry, love. I've been busy with all this moving, he replied, keeping a casual tone. Actually, I'm in the new apartment right now. Want to come see it? There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. In Queens. Yes, I can give you the address. It's a simple place, but I think you'll like it. More silence. Michael could imagine Emily's expression at that moment, probably struggling to find a polite excuse. Today will be difficult. I have commitments, she finally replied. But tell me, did you really sell the mansion? Not yet, but it's already listed. I've also gotten rid of the cars and most of the luxury goods. You know how it is. I needed quick cash to cover some losses. Michael, her voice trembled slightly. We need to talk seriously about this. How about we have dinner tomorrow at Le Bernardin? Ryan rolled his eyes and Michael had to hold back a smile. It was so predictable that she would suggest one. Of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Love, I think it's better not to. I'm trying to save money. How about you come here? I can prepare something for us. You? Cook? Emily's tone was a mixture of disbelief and poorly disguised disdain. Since when do you know how to cook? I've been learning a few things. The simple life teaches us a lot, Michael replied, exchanging a knowing look with Ryan. And I can't. Spend like before, times have changed. Of course, Emily now seemed distant. Look, I need to hang up. I have an important meeting now. We'll talk later, okay? As soon as the call ended, Ryan let out a contained laugh. She's not going to show up. I don't think so either, Michael agreed, getting up to look out the window. The view, quite different from the skyline of skyscrapers he was used to, showed lower buildings and a busy neighborhood life. But let's see how far she'll go with this. That night, alone in the modest apartment, Michael had time to reflect on his choices. The walls without expensive paintings seemed emptier, the silence deeper without the state-of-the-art sound system. He picked up his phone and opened Emily's Instagram. She had posted a photo in her stories at a luxurious cafe with the caption, "Sometimes we need a moment to ourselves to think about life." The most recent comment on her last photo was from a certain Nathan Blackwell, complimenting her beauty with suggestive emojis. Michael clicked on his profile. A real estate businessman, a frequent attendee of the same social circles they used to frequent. Interesting. A text message from Emily arrived. "Darling, sorry, but tomorrow I won't be able to meet you. I need to solve some things for the company. I promise I'll schedule something as soon as possible." Michael replied with a simple, "Okay, whenever you can," and went back to observing Nathan Blackwell's profile. There were photos of him at the same cafe where Emily was today, posted just a few minutes apart. The phone rang again. This time it was Ryan. "Michael, you need to see this. Emily just cancelled the reservation at the Plaza Hotel for the wedding." Bitter smile formed on Michael's lips. The test had barely begun, and the masks were already starting to fall. He took the engagement ring he had brought with him and observed it under the dim light of the apartment. The diamond didn't shine as brightly as before. In the almost empty fridge, a bottle of cheap wine awaited him, very different from the rare labels he used to collect. He poured himself a glass and sat at the small counter that separated the kitchen from the living room. Somehow that simple wine had a different taste. Perhaps it was the taste of the truth that was beginning to reveal itself. His cell phone vibrated with a notification. Emily had just posted a new photo on Instagram. She was at the same cafe as before, but now the photo showed only her hand, with the engagement ring accompanied by an enigmatic caption, "Sometimes life forces us to make difficult decisions." Michael finished his glass of wine, thinking about how predictable people could be when money was at stake. Tomorrow would be another day, and he was just beginning to discover who Emily Parker really was. The first week in Michael's new life was proving more revealing than he had imagined. Sitting in his new office, a modest commercial room in Queens, quite different from the corporate penthouse on Wall Street, he analyzed Emily's latest social media movements. In the past few days, she had cancelled 3 meetings, always with elaborate excuses. The last one would have been a lunch that she cancelled claiming an emergency with her sick mother. Curiously, 2 hours later, she appeared in Instagram stories at lunch at the Rainbow Room, accompanied by some friends, and to Michael's surprise, Nathan Blackwell. "The news about your bankruptcy has already spread throughout New York's high society," Ryan commented, entering the room with 2 coffees from the cart on the corner. "Emily has been telling some people that she's re-evaluating the situation of the relationship." Michael took the simple coffee, so different from the imported espressos he used to drink. "How did you find that out?" "Your ex-secretary, Sarah, still maintains contact with people from your old social circle. She heard Emily talking with some friends at the beauty salon." Michael's cell phone vibrated with a message from Emily. "Darling, I need to see you today. It's important. Can we meet at the end of the afternoon?" Something in the tone of the message alerted him. It was the first time in a week that she had taken the initiative to schedule a meeting. "She must have something planned," Ryan commented, reading the message over his friend's shoulder. "Do you want me to ask someone to keep an eye out?" Michael shook his head. "It won't be necessary. I'll meet her right here in the new office. I want to see how she'll react to this environment." The rest of the afternoon dragged on slowly. Michael occupied himself with some real work. After all, even during his test, some business needed to continue, and observed through the simple window the movement of the neighborhood. It was a completely different world from what he was used to, with real people living real lives, without the artificiality of the world he had left behind. At 5 p.m. sharp, Emily arrived. Her expression upon entering the small office was a mixture of shock and poorly disguised pity. She wore a Chanel suit and carried her inseparable Hermès bag, looking absurdly out of place in that simple environment. "Michael, my love." She approached, hesitant as if fearing that the simplicity of the place might be contagious. "How are you?" "Very well, actually," he replied, indicating the only available chair for visitors. "I've been learning a lot with this new phase." Emily sat down, clearly uncomfortable. Her eyes scanned the environment, lingering on the simple furniture, the modest computer, the absence of his former art collection. "Michael, we need to talk about us," she began, her voice assuming a tone he had never heard before. "About our future." "Of course, love. What's worrying you?" "It worries me to see you like this." She gestured vaguely at the office. "This isn't you. The Michael I knew was a man of vision, ambitious, determined to conquer the world. And you think I'm no longer that person just because I changed my lifestyle?" Emily sighed, a studiedly dramatic sound. "It's not just the lifestyle, Michael. It's everything. You're throwing away everything you've built, and I don't know if I can be part of this." Michael felt a pang in his chest, even though he was already expecting something like this. "Are you saying you don't want to marry me anymore?" "I'm saying that maybe we need to take a break," she replied, avoiding his gaze. "For you to resolve your financial situation and if I don't resolve it," he interrupted, "what if I decide I want to live like this in a simpler way?" Emily was silent for a moment, nervously playing with her engagement ring. "You don't understand, Michael. I have a lifestyle, a social position to maintain. You can't simply live with less luxury for love," he completed, carefully observing her reaction. "It's not fair for you to put me in this position," she exclaimed, standing up abruptly. "I didn't ask for any of this. You're the one who decided to throw everything away." At that moment, her cell phone rang. Michael noticed how she quickly turned the screen down when she saw who was calling, but not before he caught a glimpse of the name Nathan on the display. "I need to go," she said, composing herself. "I have an important commitment." "With Nathan Blackwell?" Emily froze for a moment but recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about. Nathan is just a friend. You know that." "A friend who coincidentally is always in the same places as you?" "Are you spying on me?" she asked, indignant. "Is that it? Besides throwing your fortune out the window, now you've become paranoid?" Michael remained calm, observing how she tried to reverse the situation, turning him into the villain of the story. It was a tactic he had seen before but never directed at him. "I'm just stating facts, Emily. You've been spending a lot of time with him lately." "He's been helping me deal with this whole situation," she exploded. "Someone needs to help me, since you decided to go crazy." The cell phone rang again, and this time she didn't even bother to hide it. "I need to go. When you go back to being the Michael I knew, come find me." After she left, Michael remained seated for a long time, absorbing everything that had happened. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Ryan. She took the bait. Time to move on to the next phase of the plan. As he watched the sun set, through the simple window of his new office, Michael thought about how money could be both a blessing and a curse. He had given Emily the chance to prove that her love was true, and she was failing every test. His cell phone vibrated with a notification. Emily had just checked in at Le Bernardin restaurant, tagging Nathan Blackwell in the post. The caption read, "Sometimes we need special friends to help us overcome difficult times." Michael smiled bitterly. The next phase of the plan would be even more interesting. The Central Park Cafe, once one of Michael and Emily's favorite places, now served as his observation post. Sitting at a discreet table in the corner, with dark sunglasses and simple clothes that made him practically invisible to New York's elite, Michael watched his still fiancée having lunch with Nathan Blackwell a few tables away. "Are you sure you want to keep watching this?" Ryan asked, sitting next to him with 2 cups of coffee. "You're torturing yourself for nothing." Michael didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the way Emily laughed at Nathan's words, lightly touching his arm in a gesture he knew. Well, that's how she used to flirt. "I need to see everything with my own eyes," he finally replied. Every detail, every lie. At the couple's table, Emily was radiant. Her new dress, which Michael recognized as being from the latest collection of a famous brand, shimmered under the afternoon sun. Nathan, in his impeccable Italian suit, leaned towards her with a smile that made his intentions quite clear. "The documents you asked for are ready," Ryan commented, changing the subject. "The false bankruptcy declaration will be published tomorrow in some business newspapers. I'm sure it will reach her ears quickly." "Great," Michael replied, still observing the scene in front of him. "And the other arrangements?" "Everything is prepared. The apartment in Queens is completely furnished with simple furniture. Your facade bank account shows a minimum balance, and rumors about your debts are circulating in the right circles." At that moment, Emily stood up to go to the restroom, leaving her bag on the chair. Nathan immediately picked up his cell phone and began typing something with a satisfied smile on his face. Michael's phone vibrated. It was a message from Sarah, his ex-secretary. "Mr. Thompson, I think you should know. Ms. Parker has been making comments at the company about selling the engagement ring. She told some people it's to secure her future, since you can no longer do that." Michael felt a bitter taste in his mouth. It wasn't a surprise, but it still hurt. "You've done enough," Ryan insisted. "Why don't you just reveal the truth and end this?" "Not yet," Michael replied, watching Emily return to the table. "I want to see how far she'll go." The lunch continued for another hour. Michael observed every smile, every touch, every look exchanged between Emily and Nathan. It was like watching a movie where the protagonist was being betrayed, except the protagonist was himself. When the couple finally stood up to leave, Michael noticed something that made his heart clench. Emily had taken off her engagement ring. Her left hand, previously adorned with the 5-carat diamond, was bare. "Let's go," he said to Ryan, standing up abruptly. Back at the apartment in Queens, Michael sat on the small balcony, observing the movement of the street below. His cell phone wouldn't stop receiving notifications. Apparently, Emily had posted several photos on Instagram during lunch, all carefully framed to not show Nathan, but with suggestive captions about new beginnings and necessary changes. "Michael," Ryan called from the living room, "I think you should see this." On the laptop screen, a social media page showed a recent post by Nathan Blackwell, a photo of Emily's hand, without the ring, holding a champagne glass. The caption read, "Sometimes it takes courage to start over. Jack a new chapter." "She didn't even wait for it to cool down," Michael commented with a sad smile. His phone rang. It was Emily. After 3 days without calling, she had finally decided to make contact. Michael answered, putting it on speakerphone. "Hi, Emily, what a surprise." "Michael." Her voice seemed rehearsed, as if she had practiced what she was going to say. "We need to talk, in person." "Sure. Do you want to come?" "Here to the apartment." "No," she replied quickly. I prefer a neutral place. Can we meet at the Central Park Cafe tomorrow?" Michael almost laughed at the irony. "Why not today? I was there this afternoon. It's a nice place." There was silence on the other end of the line. You were there today?" "Yes." I stopped. "By for a coffee." He paused purposefully. "Why? Were you there too?" No, she replied quickly. I prefer tomorrow, if possible." "All right," Michael agreed. "How about 10 a.m.? "Perfect, and Michael, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." After she hung up, Ryan looked at his friend with concern. "What do you think she's going to do?" "Break up with me, obviously," Michael replied, getting up to grab a bottle of water from the simple fridge. "But not before trying to secure some kind of financial compensation, I bet." "How can you be so sure?" Michael picked up his phone and showed Ryan a message he had just received from one of the private investigators he had hired. "Mr. Thompson, Ms. Parker just left the office of a well-known lawyer specializing in family law and divorces. She's preparing herself," Ryan concluded. "Yes," Michael confirmed, looking out the window of the modest apartment, "but not in the way she imagines." The Central Park Cafe was particularly busy that morning. Michael arrived purposely 15 minutes before the scheduled time and chose a strategic table from where he could observe the entrance of the establishment. He purposely wore his simplest clothes, basic jeans and a slightly faded polo shirt. "The newspapers have already published the news about your supposed bankruptcy," Ryan informed him over the phone. "It's on all the main business portals. Emily has certainly already seen it." "Great," Michael replied, observing the movement in the cafe. "Now we just wait for her to show her cards." Punctually at 10 o'clock, Emily entered the cafe. Even for a simple morning meeting, she was impeccably produced. Valentino dress, Louboutin shoes, and the inseparable Hermès bag. The contrast between her appearance and Michael's couldn't be greater. "Good morning," she said dryly, sitting across from him. Her eyes quickly scanned his simple clothes, and a small crease of disapproval appeared between her eyebrows. "Good morning, Emily. You want to order something?" "No, thank you. This won't take long." Michael noticed that she kept her hands under the table, probably to hide the absence of the engagement ring. He gestured to the waiter anyway. "An espresso, please. The simplest you have." Emily shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Michael, we need to be practical about our situation." "What situation exactly?" "You know very well." She finally put her hands on the table, the absence of the ring now evident. "I saw the news today. Bankruptcy? Seriously? Things happened faster than I expected," he replied calmly, observing her reactions. "And you didn't think you should tell me? Me, your fiancé?" "Ex-fiancé, from what I'm seeing," Michael commented, pointing to her hand without the ring. Emily had the decency to look embarrassed for a moment. "That's exactly what we need to talk about. Michael, you've changed. You're no longer the man I committed to marry." "Changed how? Because I'm poor now?" "Don't be unfair," she exclaimed, but lowered her voice when she noticed that some people were looking in their direction. "It's not just about money, it's about responsibility, about keeping commitments." "Like the commitment of eternal love we made?" "Please, don't make this more difficult." Emily opened her bag and took out an envelope. "My lawyer prepared some documents. It's just a formalization of the end of our engagement and an agreement about money," Michael interrupted, his voice still calm. "About compensation," she quickly corrected. "After all, I wasted 2 years of my life planning a future that you threw away." Michael took the envelope, but didn't open it. "Interesting that you mention waste of time. How's Nathan?" Emily visibly paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No, so you didn't have lunch with him here yesterday. You were spying on me." "It wasn't necessary. You weren't exactly discreet." Michael finally opened the envelope and examined the documents. "Let me see. You want a compensation of $5 million. It's more than fair, considering that you're already planning your future with another man. Nathan is just a friend. A friend who posts photos of your hand without a ring with captions about new beginnings." Emily's face turned red. "You have no right to know the truth? To discover that the woman I was going to marry is a gold digger who abandoned me at the first sign of difficulty? How dare you?" Emily stood up abruptly. "I tried to support you, tried to understand this madness of yours about abandoning everything, but you gave me no choice." "Choice?" Michael also stood up, his voice still controlled. "You had all the choices in the world, Emily. You could have stayed by my side, could have truly supported me, could have proven that your love was genuine." "Love doesn't pay bills, Michael. Love doesn't maintain the standard of living I deserve." Some people were now openly looking at them. Emily, realizing she was losing control, tried to compose herself. "Look, we don't need to make this more unpleasant than it already is. Just sign the documents, give me what's fair, and we each go our separate ways." Michael took the papers and examined them again. "You really think you deserve any compensation?" "Of course I deserve it. Or do you think I'm going to accept leaving this relationship empty-handed after everything I invested?" "Invested?" Michael smiled bitterly. "Interesting choice of words." "You know what I mean. I dedicated 2 years of my life to you, to us." "No, Emily, you dedicated 2 years to my fortune. To the status I provided you, to the luxuries you love so much. Michael took out his simple wallet and left some bills to pay. For the coffee he hadn't even touched. But you know what? You're right on one point. Each of us should go our separate ways. So you'll sign? No. He returned the envelope to her. I won't give you a cent. You can't do this. I'll sue you. Feel free. Michael began to walk. Away, but stopped and turned to her one last time. Oh, and Emily, enjoy your lunch with Nathan today. Le Bernardin is really a great restaurant for new beginnings. He left her there, open-mouthed, holding the envelope with her $1,000,000 demands. As he walked out of the cafe, he sent a message to Ryan. It's time for the last phase of the plan. Prepare everything. Ryan's office was different that afternoon. The luxury furniture and artwork that normally decorated the environment had given way to a more modest scenario, specially prepared for the next phase of the plan. Michael observed the movement on Fifth Avenue through the window, waiting for the crucial moment that was about to come. Emily just arrived at the building, Ryan informed, checking his cell phone. And she brought company. Nathan Blackwell? No. She brought Mr. William Carter, one of the most expensive lawyers in New York specializing in family law. Michael smiled. Perfect. Exactly as we predicted. The intercom rang, and the secretary announced the arrival of the visitors. Emily entered the room like a storm, followed by a middle-aged man in an impeccable suit. This is absurd, Michael, she exclaimed, throwing her bag on one of the simple chairs. You can't simply refuse to give me what's rightfully mine. Good morning to you too, Emily, Michael responded calmly. Mr. Carter, it's a pleasure to meet you in person. The lawyer nodded professionally. Mr. Thompson, we're here to try to resolve this situation in the most amicable way possible. Amicable, Emily interrupted. He's ruined and refuses to give me fair compensation for the time I wasted. If I may, Mr. Carter tried to calm his client. Let's conduct this professionally. Ryan, who had been observing the scene in silence, stood up from his desk. Certainly. Why don't we all sit down and discuss the terms? Emily looked around the office with disdain. What happened to the decor? Did you have to sell everything too, Ryan? Appearances can be deceiving sometimes, can't they? Michael commented enigmatically, sitting in one of the simple chairs. Mr. Carter opened his briefcase and took out some documents. Mr. Thompson, my client is willing to negotiate the terms of compensation. The initial $5 million can be reviewed, considering your current financial situation. How generous of her, Michael responded, exchanging a significant look with Ryan. Don't be sarcastic, Emily exploded. You destroyed all my plans. I have the right to compensation. Plans? Michael leaned forward. What plans exactly? The ones that include Nathan Blackwell? Mr. Carter looked confused. Excuse me, who is Nathan Blackwell? Nobody, Emily answered quickly. He's trying to change the subject. Mr. Carter, Ryan intervened, would you like to see some interesting photos of your client with Mr. Blackwell? I'm sure it would help better contextualize the situation. Emily visibly paled. What photos? Are you spying on me? It wasn't necessary to spy, Michael responded calmly. You yourselves documented everything on social media. Very convenient, by the way. This is an invasion of privacy, she protested. Public posts can hardly be considered private, don't you agree, Counselor? Ryan commented. Mr. Carter seemed increasingly uncomfortable. Ms. Parker, is there something you haven't told me about this situation? It doesn't matter, she responded, exasperated. The fact is that Michael has a moral obligation to compensate me for the time lost. Lost time? Michael slowly stood up. Interesting that you mention this. Ryan, I think it's time. Ryan nodded and took a folder from his drawer. Mr. Carter, before we continue, I'd like you to take a look at these documents. The lawyer took the folder and began to examine its contents. His eyes gradually widened as he read. But this means that I was never bankrupt, Michael completed. Exactly. Emily, who had paled even more, grabbed the folder from her lawyer's hands. What? What are you talking about? It's all there, Emily, Michael explained calmly. Bank statements, financial reports, corporate documents, everything proving that my fortune is intact. In fact, it has grown in recent months. But the news, the apartment in Queens. A test, he responded simply. A test that you failed spectacularly. Mr. Carter began to gather his documents. Ms. Parker, I believe we need to reevaluate our legal strategy. This situation is completely different from what you presented to me. No, she protested. He's lying. He must have forged these documents. The documents are legitimate, Ryan intervened. All duly registered and authenticated. What your client is seeing is just the tip of the iceberg. Emily let herself fall into a chair, her legs seeming unable to support her. Why? Why did you do this to me? Why? Michael approached her. Because I needed to know if you truly loved me, or if you were just interested in my money. And you gave me the answer in the clearest way possible. I can explain. You don't need to, he interrupted her. Your actions have already explained everything, including your meetings with Nathan Blackwell. Mr. Carter uncomfortably cleared his throat. Ms. Parker, I suggest we end this meeting. I no longer see a legal basis for your claims. Emily stood up abruptly, grabbing her bag. You'll regret this, Michael. You can't play with people like this. No, Emily. You're the one who played with something serious, my feelings. Michael opened the office door. And now, if you'll excuse us, I have other matters to attend to. After Emily and her lawyer left, Ryan let out a contained laugh. She doesn't even imagine what's still to come, does she? Michael picked up his cell phone and checked some messages. No, the real surprise is just beginning. The Rainbow Room was buzzing with New York's elite that night. Michael, now dressed in an impeccable Armani suit, observed the illuminated city through the panoramic windows of the restaurant. Beside him, Ryan consulted his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Are you sure she'll show up? Ryan asked, adjusting his tie. Absolutely, Michael replied, taking a sip of his 30-year-old whiskey. Emily would never resist an invitation to dine here, especially after what happened this afternoon. She must be imagining it's her chance to explain herself. As if to confirm his words, Emily appeared at the entrance of the restaurant. She was stunning in a designer black dress, clearly having prepared for another one of her performances. Good evening, Emily, Michael greeted her politely when she approached the table. Please have a seat. Michael, she began, her voice studiedly soft. I really appreciate the invitation. We need to talk about this afternoon. Yes, we do, he agreed, gesturing to the sommelier. You still prefer Chateau Margaux? Emily seemed momentarily disconcerted by the mention of the expensive wine. Yes, of course. As the sommelier walked away, a tense silence hung over the table. Emily nervously fidgeted with her linen napkin, clearly trying to find the right words. Michael, about today, she finally began. You need to understand my side. I was scared by that whole bankruptcy story, the change of lifestyle. And that's why you ran into Nathan Blackwell's arms? Emily blushed slightly. It's not like that. Nathan is just her friend, Michael gently interrupted. Yes, you've said that. Several times. The sommelier returned with the wine, performing the whole ritual of presentation and tasting. Michael took the moment to observe how Emily seemed more relaxed, seeing the signs of wealth she so cherished. The expensive wine, the elegant restaurant, their designer clothes. Actually, Emily, he continued after the sommelier walked away, I called you here today for a specific reason. I knew you would understand, she smiled, leaning forward. We're perfect for each other, Michael. That silly test only served to prove that you are exactly who I suspected you were. He interrupted her again, his voice still calm. And that's why I arranged a little surprise. At that moment, Nathan Blackwell entered the restaurant, guided by a maitre d'. Emily froze when she saw him approaching the table. Nathan, she whispered, turning pale. What? What's going on? Good evening, Emily, Nathan said dryly, sitting at the table as indicated by Michael. Mr. Thompson. Mr. Blackwell, Michael responded cordially. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Emily looked from one to the other, clearly panicking. Michael, I can explain. You don't need to, he gently interrupted her. Actually, I'm the one who has something to explain, or rather, we do. He looked significantly at Nathan. Nathan uncomfortably cleared his throat. Emily, I was invited here today to clarify some things. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Mr. Blackwell works for me, Michael explained calmly. Or rather, for one of my corporate intelligence companies. Emily paled even more. What? Every meeting, every message, every moment you spent with Nathan in the last few weeks was carefully planned and documented, Michael continued. He was just doing his job. This can't be true, Emily stammered, turning to Nathan. Nathan, tell me it's not true. I'm sorry, Emily, Nathan responded professionally. It was just a mission. Tears began to form in Emily's eyes. So, everything was a lie? Ironic, isn't it? Michael commented, pouring himself more wine. You were so concerned about securing your financial security that you didn't even realize you were being tested on multiple levels. Why? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. Why do all this? Because I needed to be sure, Michael responded, simply, and you gave me all the answers I needed. And now? Emily asked, trying to maintain her composure despite the tears that threatened to fall. Now? Michael smiled slightly. Now comes the most interesting part. Ryan? Ryan, who had remained silent until then, took an envelope from his briefcase. The photos and documents will be published tomorrow in all major newspapers and society magazines. Billionaire businessman's fiancée caught in gold digger scheme. I think it will make an excellent headline, don't you agree? Emily's face lost all color. You can't do this, it will destroy my reputation. Your reputation? Michael leaned forward. What about my trust that you destroyed? How much is that worth, Emily? Please, she begged, now openly crying. I'll do anything, don't publish those photos. Michael observed her for a long moment. You know what the difference is between us, Emily. I never had to beg for anything. I always achieved everything through work and honesty. You? Well, you chose the easier path, and now you'll reap the fruits of that choice. Emily stood up abruptly, her chair almost falling. You're cruel, Michael, a monster. No, Emily. I'm just someone who learned the most important lesson. True love is priceless. He gestured to the maitre d'. The lady is leaving. Please escort her to the door. After Emily left, practically running from the restaurant, Nathan sighed in relief. Mission accomplished, Mr. Thompson. Almost, Michael responded, checking his cell phone. We still have one last surprise prepared for tomorrow. The morning dawned busy in New York. In the penthouse of his real Upper East Side apartment, Michael observed the notifications popping up on his cell phone while having breakfast. The headlines of the main news portals and social columns talked about nothing else. Scandal in high society, billionaire businessman's fiancée unmasked, gold digger scheme. Foiled, Michael Thompson reveals ex-fiancée's plot. Emily Parker, the fortune hunter who got it wrong. The articles are having more repercussion than we expected, Ryan commented, entering the room with his tablet. Your name has been in the trending topics since 6 in the morning. Michael took a sip of his imported coffee, quite different from what he drank in the Queen's apartment. And Emily? She deactivated all her social media about an hour ago. But before that, hundreds of people had already shared screenshots of her meetings with Nathan. Any news from her? Her mother called the office a little while ago, Ryan responded, consulting his notes. She was hysterical, saying that Emily is devastated, that she hasn't left her room since last night. Michael stood up and walked to the balcony, observing the city stretching below. The apartment in Queens, which had served his purpose so well, was already being vacated. His life as a bankrupt man had lasted exactly the time necessary to reveal Emily's true nature. Mr. Thompson, his secretary called over the intercom. Mrs. Diane Parker is here. She says it's urgent. Michael exchanged a look with Ryan. Emily's mother? Do you want me to ask her to leave? No, Michael responded after a moment of reflection. Send her in. Diane Parker entered the apartment like a hurricane, her heels furiously hitting against the marble floor. It was easy to see where Emily had inherited her love for luxury. The lady wore designer clothes from head to toe. How could you do this to my daughter? She exploded as soon as she saw Michael. Expose her like that, humiliate her publicly. Mrs. Parker, Michael responded calmly. Please have a seat. I don't want to sit down. I want you to fix this situation. Withdraw those articles, do something. How was your daughter planning to fix the situation when she thought I was bankrupt? Michael asked softly. With that lawsuit for financial compensation. Diane hesitated for a moment. She was confused, hurt. No, Mrs. Parker. She was being exactly who she is, a person who sees relationships as financial investments. How dare you? Diane took a step forward, but stopped when she saw Ryan move. Emily loved you. Loved my bank account, you mean? Michael took his cell phone and showed her something. Did you know that your daughter was already planning to sell the engagement ring even before breaking up with me? I have her messages to an auction house here. Diane paled slightly. That doesn't prove anything. And the meetings with Nathan Blackwell? The consultations with lawyers specializing in family law? The attempted extortion? Extortion is a very strong word, she protested weakly. It's the correct word, legally speaking, Ryan intervened. I have all the documents filed in case you want to contest. Diane let herself fall into one of the armchairs, suddenly looking exhausted. What do you want, Michael? Money. Is that it? To withdraw the articles? Michael laughed humorlessly. You really don't understand, do you? Not everything in life comes down to money. Then why? Why do all this? To teach a lesson, he responded simply. Not just to Emily, but to all people who think they can play with others' feelings for their own interest. And you think you succeeded? She asked bitterly. Looking at today's headlines, I'd say yes. Michael paused. But it's not over yet. Diane abruptly raised her head. What do you mean? Let's just say that today's article is just the beginning. Tomorrow the newspapers will publish something even more interesting. More? What else do you want to expose? Michael smiled enigmatically. You'll see. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an important meeting. After Diane left, looking even more disturbed than when she arrived, Ryan looked curiously at Michael. Do you really have something else to publish? Of course, Michael responded, picking up a folder on his desk. The most interesting part of the story is yet to come. Which would be? Michael opened the folder, revealing a series of documents. Let's just say that Emily wasn't the first to try this kind of scheme, and I wasn't the first to be her target. Ryan whistled softly as he examined the papers. This is going to be explosive. Yes, Michael agreed, looking out the window again. As I told Mrs. Parker, the lesson needs to be complete. The conference room of New York's largest television station was packed that morning. Journalists from the country's main media outlets crowded, anxious for the press conference called by Michael Thompson. In the front row, Emily and her mother had been strategically positioned after receiving an invitation they couldn't refuse. So sure you want to do it this way? Ryan asked Michael moments before entering the room. We could simply release the documents to the press. No, Michael responded, adjusting his tie. Some truths need to be told face to face. When Michael entered the room, camera flashes fired simultaneously. He walked to the podium with the same confidence that had made him one of the most successful businessmen in the country. His eyes met Emily's for a brief moment. She seemed to have aged years in just a few days. Good morning, everyone, he began, his voice firm at the microphone. I appreciate the presence of each one of you. In recent days, much has been said about my relationship with Emily Parker and the test I conducted to prove her true intentions. Today, I'm here to reveal the complete story. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her chair, while her mother held her hand tightly. 3 months ago, I received an anonymous envelope, Michael continued, gesturing for an assistant to distribute folders to the present journalists. Inside it, there were documents that told a very interesting story about Ms. Parker's past. The journalists began to open the folders, and a growing murmur filled the room. Emily visibly paled. As you can see, before meeting me, Emily Parker had been involved in similar situations with 3 other businessmen in different states. In each case, the pattern was the same: a quickly initiated relationship, a hasty engagement, and an attempt at extortion when the relationship ended. "That's a lie!" Diane Parker stood up abruptly. "My daughter never—" "Please, Mrs. Parker," Michael politely interrupted her. "I have here the court cases, all properly documented. Your daughter managed confidential settlements in all cases, didn't she?" Emily began to cry silently, while journalists frantically photographed her reaction. "But the most interesting thing," Michael continued, "is that this wasn't a solo operation. It was a well-elaborated family scheme." Diane, who had sat down again, froze in her chair. Mrs. Diane Parker, present here, was the mentor of the entire plan. She was the one who researched the targets, planned the casual encounters, and negotiated the confidentiality agreements. A family business, we could say. The camera flashes now turned to Diane, who seemed to have lost all color in her face. "When I received that anonymous envelope, I confess that my first reaction was disbelief. After all, I loved Emily. Or at least, I loved the person I thought she was. That's when I decided to set up my own test." Michael paused, taking a sip of water. The apartment in Queens, the fake bankruptcy, Nathan Blackwell, everything was carefully planned, not just to test Emily, but to expose a scheme that had already harmed other people. Why? Emily's voice sounded weak, almost a whisper, but audible in the silence that had settled in the room. Why do it this way? Michael looked directly at her. Because some lessons need to be public to be truly learned. Because other people needed to be alerted. And mainly because the truth, as painful as it may be, should always come to light. The journalists were now jostling, dozens of hands raised with questions. "Yes, I'll answer all questions," Michael assured. "But first, I'd like to introduce some more people." The doors of the room opened and 3 men entered. Emily let out a small cry of surprise as she recognized them. They were her ex-fiancés, all successful businessmen from different parts of the country. "These gentlemen have agreed to break their confidentiality agreements to tell their stories," Michael explained. "Because, like me, they believe that silence only protects those who don't deserve protection." Diane stood up again, this time pulling Emily by the arm. "Let's get out of here." "Not so fast, Mrs. Parker," a deep voice sounded from the back of the room. A man in a dark suit came forward, showing a badge. "We have some questions for you and your daughter." Chaos ensued in the press room. Journalists stood up, cameras fired non-stop, questions were shouted from all sides. In the midst of the confusion, Michael observed the scene with a serene expression. "Is it over?" Ryan asked softly by his side. "Almost," Michael responded, his eyes still fixed on Emily, who was now being led out of the room along with her mother. "There's still one last thing to be done." 6 months had passed since the explosive press conference. The late afternoon sun tinged Michael's penthouse golden as he organized the last details of his newest initiative. On his desk, a pile of documents awaited his signature, the founding contract of the New Beginnings Institute. "The lawyers have already reviewed everything," Ryan commented, entering the room with his inseparable tablet. "The foundation can start operating as soon as you sign." Michael smiled, picking up his pen. "And the registrations for the first program?" "We already have more than 200 people interested. Your interview on 60 Minutes yesterday was a huge success." After signing the last document, Michael stood up and walked to the balcony. New York City stretched out below, the same view he had when this whole story began. But now his perspective was completely different. "Did you see the news about Emily?" Ryan asked, joining him on the balcony. "Yes," Michael responded calmly. "I heard that she and her mother made a deal with the prosecution. They testified against others involved in the scheme in exchange for a lighter sentence. Community service and restitution to the victims," Ryan confirmed. "They'll have to work for a good while to return all that money." Michael nodded, thoughtful. The last time he had seen Emily, She was leaving the courthouse after the final hearing. She looked different, simpler, without the designer clothes and expensive accessories. Maybe, finally, she was learning something. "The Institute will make a difference," he commented, changing the subject. "Help people recognize their own worth, regardless of money or social status." It was a brilliant idea to transform this whole experience into something positive, Ryan agreed. A center for psychological support and financial guidance for people who have been victims of emotional and financial scams, and also for people who need to reevaluate their relationship with money and power, Michael added. Like Emily. The intercom rang, and his secretary's voice sounded, "Mr. Thompson, the C. Magazine team is here for the interview. How you can send them in," he responded, adjusting his suit. The journalist who entered was young and seemed nervous, carrying a notepad and a recorder. "Mr. Thompson, it's an honor. Your story has inspired many people. Please have a seat." He indicated the sofa. "And call me Michael." "Mr. Michael," she corrected herself, turning on the recorder. "After everything that happened, many expected you to become more cynical, more distrustful. However, you created an institute to help people. Why?" Michael smiled. "Because true wealth isn't in the money we have, but in the positive impact we can make on people's lives. Even after everything Emily did, especially after that," he replied, "you know, I could have simply exposed her and moved on with my life. But what would be the purpose? Real change happens when we transform negative experiences into something constructive." The journalist made some more notes. "And what about love? Do you still believe in it?" "More than ever," Michael responded without hesitation. "What happened didn't make me disbelieve in true love. On the contrary, it made me value authenticity in relationships even more." "And Nathan Blackwell? Does he still work for you?" "Yes. But now as a director of one of the Institute's programs. His experience in helping unmask scammers made him perfect for helping other people not fall into the same kind of trap." The interview continued for another hour, covering various aspects of the story. When the journalist finally said goodbye, Michael returned to the balcony watching the sunset. "You know, Ryan," he commented to his friend who had remained silent during the interview, "in the end, Emily taught me the most valuable lesson of all." "Which one?" "That our true worth isn't in what we possess but in who we really are, and that sometimes we need to lose something we value to find something that really matters." Michael's phone vibrated with a notification. It was a photo of the first group of volunteers at the Institute, all smiling, ready to start work the next day. "I think in the end, everyone gained a different lesson from this story," Ryan observed. "Yes," Michael agreed, putting away his phone. "And I hope many others will learn from it too." The sun finally set on the New York horizon, marking the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. Michael knew that his story would serve as an example and inspiration for many, not as a story of revenge, but as a story of transformation and growth. "Tomorrow is a new day," he said, smiling. "And there's a lot of work to be done." Dear listeners, we hope that Michael's journey has touched your hearts and made you reflect on the true value of love and authenticity, to continue exploring equally engaging and transformative stories. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone special and leave your like. It helps us reach more people with messages that can make a difference. Which city are you following us from? Tell us in the comments. Every day we bring new stories that explore the complexities of human relationships and make us reflect on our own values. Don't miss our upcoming content. Big surprises are coming.